Hello, Morim here. In today's video I will be sharing my Hexadin build in Baldur's Gate 3 that utilizes the might of all that is evil to bring justice to those in need. Or don't. Actually, this character is a pretty solid evil boy, but can also be played as a neutral character with some questionable taste. Anything else? Not in line. And what better way to express this than to slap on heavy armor, a big heavy weapon and cleave some fools in two. Now the strengths of this build lie in its versatility and adaptability. You will have access to a bunch of strong spells, good melee damage, good range damage, CC and on-demand healing when the need arises. Smite is going to be our primary source of damage, with the option to use regular attacks when we don't want to waste our spell slots. Some of those, namely the warlock ones, are restored on a short rest, which allows for some really good sustained damage between fights. Our Eldritch Blast also allows for some devastating damage at range with the ability to push back foes, negating the need for a ranged weapon and dexterity. The biggest weakness of this build is its mobility, which needs to be offset with items. With the introduction of this build out of the way, let's have a look at the starting ability score as well as level progression. As for the stat lineup, we are going with a 10, 10, 16, 8, 14 and 16 lineup. We don't want to dump our strength completely because our jump distance is going to be really small. Since we are also using heavy armor, we need a little bit more carry capacity. Dexterity is also something we don't want to dump completely. This has to do with the initiative order and early armor, because early on you are going to use medium armor instead of heavy armor. Constitution 16 is for our health pool. We are going to be in melee range quite a lot, so having a high constitution score is mandatory. Intelligence is something we can dump safely. We don't actually need it for anything on this class. Wisdom is actually used for a bunch of saving throws, so we don't want to dump that completely. Things like Hold Person, for example, are affected by this when it's targeting you. And Charisma is our main casting modifier, so we want that to be as high as possible. 16 is actually pretty damn good, because there is no Charisma modifier on our feat that we want at +1. So when we are going to level up, we're going to take the ability score improvements every single level, just to get the Charisma score to 20. That increase to +1 is going to be extremely good for this class. You increase your hit chance, you increase your damage, you increase your spell DC, you increase your spell attack DC, and you're going to increase your likelihood to convince someone to basically kill themselves, like the Tollmaster. There is a bunch of enemies you can charisma kill, just through dialogue options. So this one is a perfect fit for a main character. For the skill proficiencies you get a bunch of stuff. We are going with Will for the race, because, come on, he's a warlock. So that's the obvious choice. If you, however, do not want to play Will, just a custom character, a half-orc or wood elf is also going to be really good. A halfling can also be very good because of the reroll at 1. So those are my recommendations if you want to play something else than Will. Now for Will I recommend Medicine, because there is basically no one else in the party that's going to be proficient in that. So having a higher medicine roll is going to come in handy quite a lot. Animal Handling, same thing. If you do not play a druid or ranger. Survival, same thing, to discover chests. And then you have your other things, like for example persuasion or intimidation. For some reason we cannot change anything here, so that's probably a bug. Otherwise I would recommend deception. As for the oath, we have actually multiple options. We're going with a deep paladin setup. This means 7 levels in paladin. We're going to reach the level 7 boni that the subclass that the oath is going to give us. This means we need to think about what we pick here. I personally prefer the Vengeance Oath, because this one can be played as neutral or even lean into the evil part of things. Yes, it's righteous, so it's not entirely in that evil section, but you can do some questionable things with that. Devotion and Ancient are mostly just good things, so you don't really want to do evil stuff with them. However, if you want to play an Oathbreaker, which is the preferred option for offensive playstyles, because you're getting an aura of hatred that's going to buff your damage. You want to pick either the Oath of Ancients or Devotion, because they're easier to break. Each oath has a set of rules. If you break those rules, you become an Oath Breaker. Now an Oath Breaker basically is a scuffed warlock, but I personally couldn't bring myself to do that, so I'm currently a Vengeance Paladin. Now if you break an oath, you can restore your oath for 1000 gold in your camp, but if you do not do that and do not restore your oath, you cannot respect that character. So keep that in mind. So for now, I'm going with the Oath of Vengeance. This gives us at level 6 the possibility to use the Aura of Protection, which I'll be talking about later, but that's going to offset the saving throw penalty we are getting through other equipment choices. Oath of Vengeance, or if you're going with the Oathbreaker, go with any and break the oath. Now, since we are going with the Oath of Vengeance, you get Inquisitor's Might. Bonus action on the channel Oath Charge. Gives you additional radiance damage that's based on your charisma modifier. This means if we have 20 here, we have +5. This means this one deals 5 additional radiant damage. That's quite a lot, and I would highly advise you to just use this whenever you can. Now at level 2 we can go with the paladin. However, the opportunity cost for getting the smite and the additional spells is going to be, extra attack is going to be delayed by 2 levels. That's not something we want to do. At level 2 we are going to change the class right here to the warlock. This will give us access to a cantrip, Eldritch Blast, as well as a second one, Friends. Now this one has a drawback, but it's either bugged and currently not working, or it's so rare that it doesn't really apply. Friends gives you advantage on charisma checks. This one can be added to, for example, guidance rolls you get from other characters, like for example a cleric. Now the subclass we can go either with a Great One or with a Fiend. I personally prefer the Fiend because of the Dark One's Blessing, gives you temporary hit points on a kill. This one is quite substantial. You basically always have this one up. So Dark One's Blessing is much better in terms of sustain. For the spells we go with Armor of Agathis, which gives you 5 temporary hit points, which do not stack with this. So temporary hit points are only one instance, so it's either this one or the other one. But still, very good. Any enemy that's going to attack you is going to be dealt 5 cold damage. If you upcast this one, it increases to 10, 15 and so on and so forth. So a very, very strong option. The second spell is going to be either Arms of Hadar or Hex. Now, personally, I prefer, instead of the Arms of Hadar, which gives you an AoE option early on, it's going to be Hex. Hex will increase your damage substantially, especially early on. Now, the next levels all go into Warlock. Remember, at this point our character is going to miss a lot, except with the Eldritch Blast. So you're going to fire Eldritch Blast all the time until level 4, which will enable us to form a pact with our weapon, which will then add the charisma modifier to the damage and to the hit rate. Before that, Eldritch Blast is your biggest friend. So at the next level, pick Arms of Hadar, and for the Eldritch invocations we are going to pick Agonizing Blast, which adds the charisma modifier to the Eldritch Blast damage. So we are basically a ranged two-handed character at this point. And we pick Repelling Blast. Devil's Sight is also a very good option. Devil's Sight is a magical type of sight, so you can look through those magical clouds of darkness. With your true dark vision, you cannot. The race features do not allow that. Magical darkness can only be seen through magical sight. But for now, Repelling Blast is going to be our best friend. The 4.5 meters you can use to push enemies from cliffs, to push enemies into chasms, and this will one-shot them. You will, however, lose the loot. So keep that in mind. At level 4, which is our level 3 in Warlock, we will pick Misty Step. This will allow us to get mobility, and we really need mobility. For the Pact, Pact of the Blade. Pact of the Blade will give us access to bind a pact weapon. This means the weapon we have equipped, every time we do a long rest, we need to use this ability to bind the weapon to us and add the charisma modifier to its attack roll and to its damage. Otherwise, you will not hit anything. At level 4, we get access to another cantrip. For this one, we are going with Blade Ward. Blade Ward gives us resistance to bludgeoning damage, piercing damage and slashing damage for 2 turns. This one is quite nice. So it's working for this turn and your next turn. So you're not exactly wasting your action with this one. Quite nice to have. And for the spells, we have a ton of options. I personally prefer Darkness because we can later on get Dark Vision, so next level, the magical wand. So when we cast this one on characters, on ranged characters in the back line, we can still hit them with Eldritch Blast, or we can just jump into the fray, jump into the darkness and still hit them, while they are blind and cannot hit us. So a very strong spell and very good defensive option. As for the feat, go with the ability score improvement in Charisma, 2 points here, to get the +1 to the modifier. And for level 5, we get the class feature. We now have something that you need to be aware of. As you can see here, the Deepen Pack gives you an extra attack when you pick the Blade Pact. Now this extra attack is specified as an extra attack here. It's the extra attack feature. It's not something that should stack with the Paladin extra attack you get at level 5 Paladin. This means at level 10 you will have 2 attacks. This will, however, 100% be fixed once the devs decide to do this. This one is not intended behavior and just a bug, 100%. So I'm going to assume this character only has 2 attacks and is not going to get the extra third attack at level 10, but you actually do. Right now at least. Before we pick a spell, let's go with the Eldritch Invocation. Devil's Sight is the best option here. 24 meters dark vision, magical dark vision, and we can now use specific spells that are going to boost our either mobility or provide us with very strong options to cast something. But I personally prefer Hunger of Hadar because it's a massive AoE, it gives you a CC option, a very strong CC option. In the worst case, you can retreat into this and still hit enemies. However, remember, you still take the damage of this one. you're affected by this. If you want the increased mobility, go with flight. This one is especially good if you do not have, and I repeat, if you do not have any mobility increasing items. Next, we don't want to actually pick Warlock 6 because there are much better options now with the Paladin. The Paladin now gets access to smites and you are going to rejoice because you're going to hit for much more damage. For the fighting style, we actually have multiple options. If you decide to go with a shield and one-hander, you can go with the dual wing option. So there is a ton of weapons that are possibly very good with this one. Or you can go with defense to increase your armor class if you choose that way. This one is preferable if you use a two-hander. As for the spells, you get Searing Smite for fire damage, Thunderous Smite for thunder damage, Wrath of Smite for psychic damage, and Frightened. Frightened is a really nice CC. Then you have Shield of Faith, which will give you additional 2 armor class. This one can be cast as a bonus action, so if you need that additional armor class, you're going to be really glad you have the spell. Protection from Good and Evil will give you a ton of benefits versus aberrations, celestials, elementals, faith, fiends, and undead. You can be charmed, frightened, possessed by them, and they have disadvantage on hits versus you, so that's a very good option, but it's selfish. And then you have Command as a CC option. You can tell ranged enemies to come to you, which is really nice because this class is lacking a bit of mobility, and you can just tell them to drop their weapon and so on and so forth. So a very versatile spell that's very nice to have. At the next level you can prepare Divine Favor, which gives you additional radiant damage on attacks, but the class itself gets a few boni. First one is Abjure Enemy. This one can be used to frighten enemies, so a nice CC. And Vow of Enmity. Now you can use your Oath charge to get advantage on attack rolls versus a specific enemy. It's nice versus bosses, but we later on get the Risky Ring, which we actually get around this level, so we don't really need this specific spell. We also get Bane and Hunter's Mark, both of which are nice, but Hunter's Mark is a concentration spell, and remember we also have Hex, so yeah, you don't really want to cast this one. Same with Bane, both are concentration spells. At level 4, with this Paladin, we get another ability improvement, which we will put into Charisma. So we now have 20 Charisma. At level 5, we get access to the extra attack feature, which stacks currently with the Warlock packed extra attack. So we now have 3 attacks, but if this one is ever fixed, we get only 2, because it's either this one or the Warlock one. We still want Paladin now because of the spell slots. We want to pick Branding Smite because it will prevent enemies from turning invisible. This one is really nice later on. We can pick up 8 because this one is not a concentration spell. Can be cast for 5 additional hit points. That's not temporary hit points, so it's stacking with temporary hit points. And we can actually pick Protection from Poison because this one is nice to have versus poison. Remember, our spell slots are basically mostly reserved for smites. At level 6, we get Aura of Protection. Now, Aura of Protection will give you and your allies nearby a saving throw boost based on your Charisma modifier. And at level 7, with the Paladin, so level 12 with the class, we get Relentless Avenger. So after performing an opportunity attack, we get a movement speed buff. We also get an additional spell slot. So after you get your Aura of Protection, you need to use it one time. The saving throw is +4 because we have a Charisma modifier of just 4 currently. I am only level 7 with this one to showcase level 7. But if you boost your Charisma modifier to +5, you get a +5 to all saving throws. All your allies are affected by this if they are close enough. So the radius is actually quite small. Next one, I want to show you the gear. Now I'm currently in Act 3 and there are some items that are a little bit better, but this one will make the build flow really nice. So that's what I'm currently showing you. First up, we are going with the Dark Fire Short Bow. This bow gives us fire resistance and cold resistance and the haste spell as a free action. Basically, it doesn't consume our spell slots. We can use it just so. So that's already really nice. You can find this short bow at Demon in Act 2. For our weapon, we are using the Charge Bound Warhammer. +1 d6 lightning damage, +2 to attacks, and +2 to damage if we are using this one as a packed weapon. It's a really strong weapon and pairs nicely with Will. So those are the weapons. You can, however, also use this one as a one-handed weapon with a shield, which loses you about 2 damage, so it's not that impactful at all. For this one, you can use, for example, a Sentinel Shield, giving you a +3 to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks. Since we only have 10 dexterity, don't pay attention to this stat lineup. Really remember the stat lineup I showed you at the beginning of the video, not this one, will offset this Mali. So we basically have 16 dexterity, but I prefer the two-handed look. Risky Ring gives us advantage on this class. It's really hard to get consistent advantage on specifically the Paladin or the Warlock, so having advantage all the time is really good. And notice something, this one gives us disadvantage on saving throws. However, since we're going with the protection aura with the paladin level 6, so the Oath of Vengeance, we're getting our charisma modifier on all our saving throws, meaning strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. This offsets the Mali of this ring. For the second ring, we are going with the Killer Sweetheart. Now, Killer Sweetheart will give us a guaranteed crit on our next attack roll after killing a creature. However, we can determine when that crit happens, because we get a reaction that doesn't consume the reaction afterwards. So we can kill a rat, then go to the boss of the specific dungeon, and then one-shot the enemy, because we can just chain our smites with this one. It doesn't consume the reaction, so we can crit, so we can guarantee a crit on the target, and we still can use our Divine Smite on critical strike. Now, if you want a reference for where to find those items, make sure to check out the video down below. It's 25 items that are easy to miss up until the end of Act 2, so all of those items are showcased there. Next, we're going with Evasive Shoes. We can, however, also use the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, giving us a Misty Step cast for free. And we get nice boni because we cannot be enwebbed, entangled, ensnared, or slip on grease or ice. However, if you're using those boots on something else, we can use the Evasive Shoes, granting us an armor class bonus of +1, which is substantial. We can combine this one with the Cloak of Protection to get another +1, and +1 to saving throws, which offsets the effect of Risky Ring even more. Now, when we combine this one with a shield, we can get to 23, 24 with the +3 shield we can find in the video link down below. And we can boost this one even further with other effects. For the gloves, we are currently using the Helldusk gloves to improve our strength saving throws, so even more, because we need to. Our strength is only at level 10, and we have disadvantage here. And we get a +1d4 fire damage with our weapon. Now, there's a possible better alternative to this one, since we are using 10 dexterity, not 14. Like I said, don't pay attention to this stat lineup. The beginning of the video showcases you the perfect stat lineup. We can use Gloves of Dexterity to buff our Dexterity to 18. This gives us a +4 to Dexterity saving throws and a +1 to attack. However, it's less damage overall. Now, our amulet. When we are using the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, we don't actually need this amulet, because this amulet is giving us a free Misty Step. It can be found in the Defiled Temple in a gilded chest. So in the Goblin Camp Defiled Temple in Act 1. Now, if we are using the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, we can exchange this amulet for the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet. Once per long rest, we can use this effect on a critical strike to paralyze the target for 2 turns. And paralyze guarantees critical strikes, so we can chain critical strikes afterwards. It's a very strong combo. I have not made it work, at least not now, because there's so many non-humanoid enemies in the game that I found this amulet kind of subpar. So I'm using this setup because it's just easier to use. Gives me more value, at least in every single fight. And the next combo is going to be really nice. So we have Adamantite Splint Armor here that gives us a reeling effect on attackers when they hit you with a melee attack. Now, reeling debuffs their attack rolls. We also get less damage taken, cannot take critical strikes. But that reeling effect procs Diadem of Arcane Synergy. We inflict a condition. Doesn't matter if it's positive on us, doesn't matter if it's negative on enemies, doesn't matter if that enemy is attacking us and then inflicted by that condition. This means when an enemy attacks us, they get the reeling condition and we get the Arcane Synergy buff. Now, Arcane Synergy increases our weapon attack damage by our spellcasting modifier, meaning we get a +5 from our charisma. Now we can use haste on us, like so, and we get Arcane Synergy. This buffs our damage from +7 to +12. We now have 6 attacks with insane damage. And we can use a bonus action to also proc this one from Inquisition Smite, when we short rest like so, and then buff ourselves with Inquisition Smite, which is not a concentration spell. We get the +5 and +5 from the helmet. And we still have our haste. This means we can haste, then Inquisition Smite, and then go to town. This build has insane burst damage. Anyway, this sums up the build guide. So if you like this one, please leave a like, leave a comment if you have any questions or remarks, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. You can also join the channel membership or leave a donation if you have the spare coin. So see you next time and bye.